So in the last video, I talked about where I thought every NASCAR Cup Series driver will finish in 2023. And because of that, I decided that I might try my hand at the NASCAR Xfinity Series in terms of predicting how well some drivers might do and how bad others could fare. Bear in mind that this video is recorded a couple days ahead of when I'm uploading it, so if a driver or team isn't mentioned, then something was probably announced in between recording and publishing this. The first couple I'll just breeze through, as I think these ones are pretty understandable. It's really hard to pinpoint where some of these underfunded teams are going to finish, but I have Bailey Curry in 27th. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. Blaine Perkins in 26th, who's leaving CR7 Motorsports in the Truck Series and going to SS Greenlight in the Xfinity Series to replace Joe Graf Jr. I thought he did a solid job back when he ran that partial schedule with our Motorsports in 2021. He actually won a stage at Talladega in the fall with the team, so I think he'll do the bare minimum in this car and finish it off in this particular spot. I have Garrett Smithley in 25th. It's great for him to get a full-time opportunity in the Xfinity Series with BJ McLeod, but I'll keep my expectations for him relatively low. Jeffrey Earnhardt in 24th. He'll be running the full schedule with Alpha Prime Racing in the 44, and I think this is great for both parties involved, but again, I'll keep my expectations relatively low for this bunch and put them at 24th. They had some strong top 20 and even top 15 runs last season, so they could surprise me. I've got the real winner of the 2016 Spring Talladega race, Brennan Poole, in 23rd. I like Brennan Poole a lot. I think he's probably one of the most underrated talents in the garage, but I just don't trust the equipment propelling that talent far enough. No disrespect to JD Motorsports. I have Jeb Burton in 22nd. Burton was really done a bit dirty after being kicked out of Colleague Racing. He had a great 2021 season, picking up a win and finishing 10th in points, but because Nutrient Ag Solutions couldn't make up their mind as to whether they wanted to leave or not, Burton was let go. He settled for our Motorsports and had a pretty terrible season, finishing 16th in the standings. Now he's taking the 27 to Jordan Anderson Racing, and to be honest, I'm not expecting much. The competition is much denser, especially in the midfield this year, and JAR didn't really impress with Mike Snyder behind the wheel last year. I just have a hard time thinking that Burton will elevate this organization. I have Connor Mosack in 21st. He's running 20 races for Sam Hunt Racing in the 24, and because he's running for Xfinity points and because he'll likely accumulate more points than the drivers behind him in fewer starts, I have him finishing in this spot. The other SHR is a fully capable team, and I expect them to take a step forward in terms of performance this year. There's Parker Retzlaff in 20th, who'll be taking over the 31 car for Jordan Anderson Racing. I think this kid's got a ton of talent. He had some very impressive runs with RSS Racing last year, even finishing 10th at Richmond in only his second start. Jordan Anderson Racing is a decently competitive team, so I think the bare minimum in terms of what to expect, considering his talents, would be finishing in the top 20 in the standings. I've got Anthony Alfredo in 19th. He's joining BJ McLeod Motorsports in 2023, driving the number 78 car. To be honest, I think he's got the talent, and I think he can propel this car far enough to at least finish in the top 20 in the standings. He didn't set the world on fire with our Motorsports, but you look at the names behind him, which I think he can beat, and I just can't help but think things will be a little bit different here at BJMM. I have Jeremy Clements finishing 18th in points. Last year was really good for Clements, picking up a win at Daytona and making it to the Xfinity Series playoffs. I think his team shows a little bit of speed, beating some pretty capable teams behind him, but with the competition in the Xfinity Series continuing to stack year after year, it's kind of squeezing independents like him lower and lower in the points. I think that will happen this year. Then you have Ryan Sieg in 17th. Ryan Sieg had a very good season last year, but I just see a couple more drivers edging him out, and I think he finishes it off in this spot. In 16th, I have Kaz Grala, a very talented driver and very deserving of his full-time opportunity over at Sam Hunt Racing. I see this being a small step, and it could potentially be playoff bursts and wins consistently in the future. It won't be a great year, at least I don't think it will light the world on fire, but I think it will be a small step to success. Now we get into the top 15 in points, and here things get a little bit interesting and the takes get a little bit spicier. In 15th, I have none other than Brett Moffitt. Brett Moffitt is an undervalued talent in the ranks of NASCAR. You would think that a Truck Series champion, a proven NASCAR winner, and a Rookie of the Year winner in the Cup Series will get a top-notch ride that complemented his talents. But ever since he left GMS Racing in the trucks after 2020, it's kind of been downhill for Moffitt's career. He spent most of 2020 through 2022 with our Motorsports, and it wasn't that great. In 2020, they actually showed a lot of speed, and Moffitt looked reasonably competitive, but the next 2 years would not see that, and were quite frankly dismal. He had flashes, glimpses of the champion in himself, but other than that, not much came out of it. I think the problem with our Motorsports is they were spread too thin. They don't have many employees, but in 2022, they had 3 cars, the same amount of teams that Colleague Racing has. This has to have spread employees too thin and affect the performance of all 3 cars. I blame it a little bit more on the team rather than Moffitt, because his first Xfinity race outside of an hour car in 2022, he finished 10th for SS Greenlight at Kansas, and he had top 10 speed and looked like his old self. Now in 2023, he's going to be continuing that relationship with Ford, and is going to be joining a team he had some one-offs previously with, AM Racing. I think Moffitt has a strong year with this bunch, and I think that he'll prove to everyone that it was not a driver problem at our Motorsports. In 14th, I have Landon Castle. Now look, I like Landon. I think he's a great guy, and I also think he's got a lot of talent. For years, we said to ourselves, just give this man a shot and good equipment, and he'll show everyone just how good he is. Well, at the beginning of 2022, years of outperforming his equipment paid off. This was it. Landon Castle is going to win a race, make the playoffs, and prove to everyone, and more importantly, prove to Kaulig that they made the right choice. And then he went winless. He didn't make the playoffs, and he really only showed speed at the shorter, flatter tracks and larger, faster tracks. On the ladders front, he finished 5th at Spring Atlanta, 5th at Spring Talladega, 8th at Summer Atlanta, 10th at Michigan, and 3rd at the Fall Talladega race. On the short tracks front, he finished 2nd at Martinsville in spring, 3rd at New Hampshire before being disqualified, and 4th at the season finale at Phoenix. These were his only top 5s of the season, the only times he got close to the checkered flag. He had some top 10s spread across some intermediates, and one at the Roval, but other than that, his numbers were pretty bad for Kaulig standards. He mostly ran in the teens, and for that he finished 13th in the standings. There is some hope for him to be a little bit more competitive this season, but I just don't see it. Not just when you look at the names in front of him, but when you look at Kaulig as a whole. They were off for most of the 2022 year, with AJ Allmendinger doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but still struggling. And if last year was a struggle, I think this year is going to be more of the same. In 13th, I have Parker Kligerman. I am beyond elated that someone finally gave this man an opportunity to drive full-time in the Xfinity series. The talent he boasts is just too good not to be given this ride. Parker Kligerman is going to be a beast at the play tracks and the road courses, there's no doubt about it. But my concern lies with the other ovals. I know Big Machine Racing won with 2-time Xfinity champion Tyler Reddick at Texas, but I just don't know if Parker can extract that much out of this equipment. Not to mention that I think there are 12 drivers who can either win a race to get themselves into the playoffs or just have enough speed to edge out Parker. I think it will be a solid first year, and like I said for Kaz Grala, I think this will be a small stepping stone into future success. I think this is definitely the one that I have the highest chance of getting wrong, but I'm still going to be fervent with this prediction. Now in 12th, I have Riley Herbst. In 2020, in a Joe Gibbs Racing Supra, the man finished 12th. In 2021, in a Stewart-Haas Racing Ford, he finished 11th in the points, and in 2022, he finished 10th. Maybe he'll finish 9th this year? I personally don't think so. The competition has increased a ton, and I just don't see a guy like Riley Herbst stepping up to the task. But on another note, let's give the man credit where credit is due. Yes, his numbers in good, race-winning, championship-contending cars aren't the best. He probably would not have gotten that seat if he had not had the backing of that Big M, but he hasn't been completely atrocious. He still finishes in the top 10 and even top 5 on a semi-consistent basis. Riley Herbst is kind of like the Austin Dillon of the Xfinity series. He does the absolute bare minimum, makes the playoffs, and does a decent job. The one difference between them is that one is a winner and the other is not. But I think that changes in 2023. I think Riley Herbst wins a race this season. He's really, really good at the play tracks, and I think that could present a prime opportunity for Herbst to collect the checkered flag. Unfortunately, he just doesn't have the minerals it takes to go far in the playoffs and beat some of the more talented names in front of him. Hence why I think he will be out of the round of 12 and finish rock bottom in the playoff standings. In 11th, I have Daniel Hemrick. I talked about this last year in my mid-season Xfinity Series review and in my playoff analysis of the field, but Daniel Hemrick's 2022 season was pretty awful. I place a little bit more of the blame on Kaulig Racing than I do on Daniel Hemrick. He was one of the most consistent drivers of the 2021 season driving for JGR and won the championship that year. You can't possibly tell me that he went from 1st to 9th in the standings simply because he lost his competitive edge. No, I think it's still there, and on the off chance Kaulig actually brings a good car to the table for Hemrick, he runs well and finishes well. The man is obviously very talented, but I think he's hit the end of the road in his career. I think 2023 will be even worse. There is no championship caliber leader in their Xfinity program anymore, and I think that will affect their performance. In 10th, I have Daniel Hemrick's rookie teammate Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith is coming off the back of 2 very impressive Truck Series seasons. Last year, he made it to the Championship 4 and nearly won the title. Kaulig Racing made the right decision in luring Smith away from the TRD camp and into their stable. Unfortunately, like I said with Hemrick, I think Kaulig Racing takes a bit of a step back, and I think that will hinder this rookie's chances of capturing the Rookie of the Year award. However, I do think he will wipe the floor with his teammates. He's bold and he's aggressive on track, and that's sure to get the sun and spotlight on him for at least one race this season. I think if he can finish in the top 10 in points, it will be a mighty impressive season for Smith. In 9th, I have none other than Sheldon Creed. The first 75% of Creed's 2022 season was pretty abysmal. He had a hard time adjusting from a truck to an Xfinity car. For some drivers, the transition is seamless, like his teammate Austin Hill. But for others like Creed, it can take a long time. By the time he rolled into the second Daytona race, Creed was showing a ton of speed. Unfortunately, it was too little too late. But towards the end of the year, he proved that he was getting the hang of it. You look at Darlington, and you also look at the Charlotte Roval, where he had some very, very good runs. I look at the improvement he showed and the speed he had towards the end of the year, and I can't help but think that Creed is going to at least make the playoffs and maybe score 1 to 2 wins this 2023 season. I still think he's miles behind his teammate Austin Hill though. In 8th, I've got Sammy Smith. Sammy Smith's ARCA Menard Series season was, quite frankly, impressive last year, but you kind of expect him to put up the kinds of numbers he did in the best car on the grid. He was still pretty good on the Xfinity side of things, showing a ton of speed, but there were cases when this maybe needed a little refinement. It's going to be a massive learning curve for Sammy, but I don't think it takes him long to find victory lane. Not just once, but twice. I think he squeaks his way into the round of 8 and wins the Rookie of the Year honors this 2023 season. I think that's a pretty realistic prediction, and I trust Sammy Smith to execute. In 7th, I have Sam Mayer. Sam Mayer's 2022 season, his first full-time season in the Xfinity Series, was very, very good. He was extraordinarily consistent, 11 top 5s and 19 top 10s out of a 33-race season. For a 19-year-old kid, that's pretty impressive. Towards the end of the season, he was really finding his stride, and I think after that year under his belt, he will improve. Unfortunately, the competition is thickening up just a bit, so while I think Mayer will improve and score that elusive win, as well as make it to the round of 8 for the second year in a row, I just cannot put him any further. In 6th, I have John Hunter Nemechek. I'm glad Nemechek is A, moving up to the Xfinity Series, and B, moving up to the Xfinity Series with a good team behind him. I think it's going to be a really good year for JHN. In his first start at Richmond with JGR, he almost won, and would have had Ty Gibbs not washed him up the track. At Dover, he ran a pretty solid race before a mechanical issue took him out, and at Texas, he had a top 5 car before a crash took him out. While the luck may not have been there, the speed is evident. Thus, I think JHN is going to have a pretty solid season, a pretty consistent one, and can make a deep run into the round of 8. Now in 5th, I have a bit of a shocker. It's none other than Brandon Jones. Brandon Jones is probably the most underrated and overhated driver in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Pre-2019, you wouldn't be far off saying he's maybe a bust. He didn't do anything at RCR, and he hardly did anything in his first season at JGR. However, since he got his first win at Kansas in late 2019, his performance went up. He had his best season to date in the Xfinity Series in 2020, getting 3 wins and overall showing a ton of speed. 2021 was a bit of a down year, going winless, but he was still very consistent and finished 7th in points. 2022 is shaping up to be a great year for Jones, snapping his long winless streak at Martinsville in the spring, and at that same track in the fall, he was tracking to make the championship 4. Ty Gibbs intervened, but still, for as much of a paid driver as he is, the guy's got talent, and I think with junior motorsports, people will start to recognize that a little bit more. I don't think he'll have a Noah Gragson type season this year, but I think he can get at least 3 wins and best his best points finish thus far by finishing 5th. I think he'll just narrowly miss out to 4 drivers who I feel pretty confident will make the Final 4. And I'm sure my Final 4 resonates with a lot of you all's Final 4. In 4th, I have Austin Hill. I was genuinely shocked at how good Austin Hill was in 2022. 2 wins, 11 top 5s, 21 top 10s, and a pole at Talladega in the fall. Speaking of a play track, that was Hill's strength last year. Austin Hill is extraordinarily good at the art of running a play track. He led tons of laps at either Daytona, Atlanta, or Talladega, and won at Daytona and Atlanta. I think we all know that Hill is a force to be reckoned with at those joints, but he also had strengths at other track types. He was pretty good at the intermediates and was actually a top 5 driver at the road courses. All things considered, Hill is a pretty versatile driver, and because of that, I think he sort of takes over AJ Allmendinger's dominance at the road courses. He's not going to be nearly that good, but I think he leads the series with wins at those tracks. In 2023, I'm predicting Austin Hill has at least 5 wins. I think he takes a huge step up in performance and closes off the season 4th in points. While he's very good at a lot of different tracks last year, I think there are 3 drivers that read Phoenix just a word better than Hill. One of those drivers being Josh Berry, who I think finishes 3rd by season's end. I think we forget this, but Josh Berry made it all the way to the Championship 4 in only his first full-time Xfinity Series season. Now, while he fell off right after the Las Vegas win that punched him into the Championship 4, he did score 3 wins, 11 top 5s, 20 top 10s, and a pole. Credit where credit is due, Josh Berry put on quite a show in 2022. He was a contender at a lot of the short tracks and intermediates ran last year, and I think that performance continues into this year. I think Josh Berry gets 3 to 4 wins this 2023 season, and while I think he finishes 3rd at the end of the day, I certainly don't think he won't be a title contender this year. I think he'll give a huge fight for the next 2 drivers I'm about to mention, one of them being Justin Allgaier, who I predict will finish 2nd at the end of the day. With 3 wins, 16 top 5s, and 23 top 10s, as well as a pole, Justin Allgaier was easily the best driver in 2022, until you look at the other 2 drivers he was beaten by. He was good in 2022, while 2 other names were great. Justin Allgaier is truly the Denny Hamlin of the Xfinity Series. Every time he sprints from the green flag at Daytona to the checkers at Phoenix, he beats a bunch of names greeted by a handful of names. Every year, Justin waits to see if this is a year he finally does it, if this is a year he finally brings home the hardware. And yet another year, I think he'll continue to be in that waiting room. And while I think he'll score just as many wins as maybe Ty Gibbs in 2022, I think there's one driver who beats him and crumples up the competition this year like a wad of paper. That man being Cole Custer, Old C-Square. Cole Custer's had quite a miserable last 3 seasons, where he spent time in the Cup Series driving the 41 car, doing basically nothing. Finally, after all that time, he decides to go back down to the Xfinity Series. When Cole Custer announced that he'll be hopping back down to the second-tier series of NASCAR, shivers were sent through all the drivers, and I reckon all the owners got genuinely frightened. Last time we saw Custer full-time in the Xfinity Series, he scored 7 wins and finished second in the 2019 standings. He was a part of the Big Three that saw him, Tyler Reddick, and Christopher Bell win left and right. Cole Custer was lethal in a season that saw probably the densest competition the Xfinity Series had seen in years, and at a time when Kyle Busch was still racing. In fact, speaking of Kyle Busch, Cole Custer postponed the celebration of Kyle Busch's 200th win in the ranks of NASCAR by a day by winning Fontana at 19. I think he makes quick work of the field this year, and I'm honestly expecting him to get 6 to 8 wins this season. This is Custer's home. I mean, he won at Fontana in 2022. This is where we see that 00 magic and that talent that's been idle the last couple of years come to life. And so I think that Cole Custer finishes it off first in the standings, and by season's end, I think we'll be calling him the 2023 NASCAR Xfinity Series champion. Agree or disagree? Was I perhaps a little too harsh for some drivers, or a little too generous for some drivers? And finally, who do you think makes the playoffs this 2023 NASCAR Xfinity Series season? Let me know down in the comment section below. I got some pretty interesting predictions for my NASCAR Cup Series points predictions video, so I'm curious to see how you think some of these drivers stack up. And as always, this has been the news. I'll see ya.